Hi, Dr. Francis Yu here, and today we're going to do some Enneagram talk. And in particular, this is going to be my Enneagram review of the show The Good Place, which I just finished watching yesterday. And even from the beginning, I thought it was a great, um, the characters were a great just manifestation and showcasing of the different Enneagram types. And to the point where I even thought maybe the creators knew stuff about the Enneagram, but that's uh, I don't know, and I haven't done that research. But I wanted to go through the main characters at least, and maybe some of the side characters, and just see what I saw. And I'll do a separate post, not post, separate video talking about the philosophical review because I'm a philosopher and I have some things to say about that as well. But in this video, let's talk about the Enneagram. For those of you who don't know, the Enneagram is uh, a methodology, a method, a symbol, a way to uh, conceive, perceive, describe, and discuss various aspects of many things, but one of the things is human personality and our behavior. And so I wanted to talk about some of the characters and see how the different Enneagram types show up in the different characters, and which may help you understand Enneagram types, but also enjoy the show a little bit more. All right, so let's start with the Enneagram type 1 and the character. Oh, sorry, there are going to be spoilers, number one. And number two, I am not discussing any other aspects of the show, as in that I think the acting was good or whatever. It's strictly about just the Enneagram stuff for this video. All right, so the type one, Michael, the character Michael is the, um, lack of better terms, kind of pun semi intended, the perfect characterization of the Enneagram type 1 character. So throughout the show, there are his character changes. In other words, his I don't know what to say, his alliance or what everyone else knows about him. That he first they thought he was the architect of the good place, the fake good place, and then they realized he was a demon from the bad place, and then he became the main character's friends, the other main character's friends. But throughout all of this, the Michael's oneness actually persisted and consistently manifested through from the very beginning to the end of the show. And it really comes out when he's really focused on making things better, right? Even in his acting, when he's uh, the architect of the fake good place, he's focused on making things better. Oh, the neighborhood isn't good enough. I have to make it better. There are these flaws. Where is the flaw? The flaw is in the rock, or the flaw is me. I'm the fault. There's this constant criticism, looking for flaws, and identifying imperfections and badness in everything. And this persists all the way through to seasons 2, 3, and 4, when now he ultimately is trying to improve or make better the whole afterlife designation system. And in essence, that becomes his mission, and it becomes he really believes it's his responsibility to make things better, make things good, and all of that. And that carries through all the way from the beginning and the end. And so the Enneagram type 1 is all about goodness in various aspects. So the Michael keeps looking at flaws, perceives the flaws, and wants to improve things, improve things, improve things, which is what the type 1 does. But here is the type 1 can have the same motivations, sorry, the same behavior with different motivations. So Michael originally, I would say he's more, it's a self-absorbed kind of goodness, and he has to make things better to prove to himself that he's good enough. But then it changes to a more universal, literally, uh, eternal uh, focus on the goodness of this point system and afterlife system, and the togetherness, making sure that the relationships are good and everything that's working well and things like that. And so that's the type oneness of Michael, the oneness part. And what drives it home even further is that you can see the Enneagram type 1 is next to the type 2 and the type 9. It's in between. I call it the neighborhood, which is slightly unfortunate because I don't want you to get confused with the term neighborhood from the actual show. But the type 1 Enneagram type has characteristics of the type 9 and the type 2. Now, Michael does this from time to time, and it makes sense because it's not the primary characteristics or behavior. There are instances in which Michael resigns himself to uh, make sure others are doing okay. I remember this one time the bad place demons were kind of wrecking the place, and then he said, "Oh, let's just give them what they want until they get happy," and then he basically starts to give them stuff and do everything that they wanted, and because he was in that situation, and his nineness comes out a little bit more discreetly. Uh, there are times where he wants to, well, he does this a few times where he pretends to like freak out, or that time where he says, "Oh, I can't." He has a breakdown, quote unquote, and sort of dissociates from everything going around, and that's the nineness there. So the other two things about Michael's oneness, which is very interesting and well done, was his lines of transformation to the type 7 and the type 4, because under certain circumstances the type 1 develops or moves towards having qualities of the type 4 and type 7. And when the type 1 is overwhelmed, they attain or manifest characteristics of an average or unhealthy type 4. So there are various events where Michael gets into this woe is me, everything's my fault, I'm terrible, I'm so bad. And he has that in season 1 where he says, "Oh, I'm the fault of this neighborhood." And then he has that midlife crisis where he then tries to, gets the car and the fancy car and changes his image. And then later he has this sense of wanting to be significant. He wants to be human as well, and he gets into this "woe is me, I am so bad," and then he identified with this "woe is me, I'm so, you must have pity on me, I have pity on myself" kind of um characteristics and behavior. And that's exactly the type 1, average type 1, unhealthy type 1, moving towards an average unhealthy type 4, which it's magnificent example of that. Now the opposite side, the security um, movement of the type 1, when they're in an atmosphere of safety, or they feel that they can kind of let go of themselves in a good way, then they move towards the type 7. Now in the season 1, Eleanor brings him out and to have fun, and then he starts getting excited about doing this new exciting things, and which he's just excited about to try these new things. And part of the running gag of the show is that they are very human quote unquote mundane things, but are drastically for him different from his uh, architect persona or his demon persona, or whatever persona that he has. But then once he lets his hair down and relaxes, he's able to pursue these interesting, spontaneous uh, interests, and that's really what happens when the one gets into the security zone. They take on characteristics of the Type 7, and I thought it was just a beautiful example of the Enneagram Type 1. Okay, so that's Michael, the Type 1. Going to Type 2, we have Tahani. Essentially, she is obsessed, constantly doing everything. Her focus and attention is on, you could say, attention or feeling loved and needed. And it stems from a lot of it from her not feeling wanted, needed, and loved and important because of her family dynamics. So everything that she does, all the way from episode 1 to the last episode, it is all about her, how to say, giving and her generosity and her service, and showing that has this she has a certain image of being helpful and generous and giving. And this, she definitely develops and becomes healthier as the show goes on. In the very beginning, it's condescending, or it's very intrusive, her generosity. And by the end, her giving is more selfless, more humble, and it comes out of a place of being loved. She reconciles with her sister and her family, and she feels that I'm loved now, so I can keep being generous without needing to do stuff for others in order to receive their love. And I think Tahani's journey is a classic two. It's a classic two-ness. And you do see, so the Enneagram 2 is in the 1, 2, 3 neighborhood, because the 1 is next to the 2 and 3 is next to the 2. And this comes out in Tahani a few times, somewhat consistently, which makes sense because they aren't as um, focused, they're not as much a center as the two-ness, her two-ness. So where does the threeness come out? Her image of her value and her worth, about what she can do and what she can accomplish, and it's her idea of being able to be connected with more people, or that's kind of the 2 and 3 combination there, where it's really about her showing her value by showing her connection with others, but also throwing these parties, meaning she can't throw a great party, it's not good, and then that means she failed, and that's then her self-image and egoistic approach of herself then falls apart. And the other side is this perfectionistic part of the Type 1 that Tahani does occasionally go to, because of her having to be better at things. And this is a classic 2 version of that, because having to be better is not the sake of just the wanting to be perfect or be better, but it's this comparing and relating to her sister and her general worth as a person, as being accomplished, or uh, or being generous, or contributed something. So Tahani is the 2. I didn't see as much of her going to the 4 and the 8, which are in the internal lines of development. So I'm going to not go into that here. Let's go to the Type 3. I would say this is I'm not as confident about this, because this is a character introduced later, But I would say Brent, the human that's introduced in season 4, is very type 3E. He is essentially obsessed with his value, meaning he believes, oh yeah, I deserve to be in the good place, or I deserve to be in the best place. And there is this constant, hey, look, I made my family business increase from X to Y, even though it's a relative very small amount. He takes uh, his image is focused on, hey, look what I did. And literally no one in the show until later can convince him that he is just not so great. He is not so worthy and valuable because he has built up this ego self image of, I'm so awesome. I accomplished so much. But in reality, he's not accomplished that much at all. And he's able to even demean others or take any sort of criticism as a criticism to his ego and his accomplishment. And I think he's the closest thing to a 3 in this show. And he does have I would say a 4 wing, meaning he leans towards the 4 more than towards the 2, because he's gets very defensive, although any can get defensive, but he gets defensive when he has his book and right, he says, oh, I'm so awesome, look how great this is. And he becomes, um how to say, he gets defensive about his specialness, about how awesome he is. And that's the 4 flavor of the 3 with a 4 wing. Now, for the type 4, initially I thought, oh, maybe Jason is a type 4, but because he does have this, initially, that he was trying to be John Yu, and then wanted to show others who he really was, which is a very 4, I am who I am kind of thing. But I changed my idea, I mean my mind, and so I don't think he's a type 4. Right now, I'm not sure if there were any really, really type 4 characters in the show. Chidi, though, is a classic, perfect type 5. Its entire existence is about wanting to know the answer and having to know because he feels that he doesn't know things. And that shows up in his being studying what he studies, moral philosophy, becoming a professor, and even becoming the teacher. His persona is the teacher for most of the show. And he also has his fourness kind of comes out when they talk about, he says, oh, my ideal day is going out on a the lake in a boat with reading French poetry. And that when he actually gets a chance, he says, oh, this was more of a imaginary dream. I had never actually done this before, which is a very 4 thing, meaning the idealization and romanticization of something is more concerned over or concerned about than the thing. It's kind of like a someone who imagines themselves being a great piano player but never actually practiced the piano, and the image of being a great piano player supersedes the actual learning the piano. That can become a very 4 like scenario. So Chidi also, he does, how to say, so Chidi is the perfect 5, and you can see his Fourness come out because he's in the 4, 5, 6 neighborhood, 5 being his home, you could say, and his 6ness comes out I would say it's not a strong argument from his indecision, going back and forth, but he is definitely a heady, thinky, relying on his thinking to solve everything type of person. And it doesn't really work that well for him. Another great thing that happens to him is when the type 5, when they're in a security, when they can let go of themselves and feel more confident about who they are, they're with loved ones or whomever, they go towards the type 8. And at the end of, well, the very beginning of the show, he's very confident about being in the good place, and his confidence allows him to be um, very direct and I'll say antagonistic towards Eleanor, because he's just so basically 5 can get full of themselves and become authoritative in maybe not in the best way. But this comes out in a good way at the end when he regains his memories and then suddenly gets out of his head and gets more into his body, is able to speak his thoughts more clearly because he's just more in his eightness, being able to be out there and expressing and being in his body and being able to be who he is in his body and not relying on his thoughts so much. So it's a very classic 5 thing that's going on with him. So the type 6, I am not 100% behind this one, but I would say Jason is a type 6, largely because he frequently, or at least several times, mentions how he likes belonging to a group, belonging to the team. He's always mentioning his alliance with the Jacksonville sports team that I forget, or with his dance crew, or with his afterlife posse, or his dance crew, and is always a focus on being belonging part of the group and being grounded in that aspect. And this also shows up in his anti-authoritarian versions of him, in which he is frankly anti-law and anti-rules, and he just does what he wants, and in a way it helps him distinguish who's for him and who's against him, which is the classic 6 thing to do. And he doesn't have as much of the I don't know, he has a different kind. He shows his anxiety a different way than typically what I would say in a type 60 way. But it shows up frequently when he's talking about his relationship with Janet, or especially there where he's kind of back and forth, and he's really a devoted person, I would say, which is a very 6 thing type to do, and being devoted to his to Pillboy, to his father, to his dance group, to the Jaguar team, and the belonging and groundedness in the group. So I would say Jason's very 6y. Okay, the 7 and 8 space. So Eleanor is definitely somewhere here. I would say she is more of an 8. So let's do that after the 7. But who is a type 7? I think you could make a very good argument that Jason is very 7y as well as being 6e. He essentially spends very little of his attention inwards, and he's always looking for the next interesting thing. He's always excited about something, spontaneous. It's just suddenly there, instantaneously doing something, and is able to just do it. And something else could be going on, and then his thoughts go somewhere else, or his attention goes somewhere else. So, would I say he's more of a 6 or a 7? I'm not sure right now. Let's just say it's kind of in between. Maybe I'll change my mind later. So, the type 8. Eleanor is definitely the type 8 because she has the most character development, and ultimately it's shown that she has this, how to say, showcases her barrier, announces to people to not go against her barriers. She goes to work and says, I don't want to be part of your group, whatever. This is my boundary, and don't cross it. And I'm going to defend it. I'm going to attack you if you cross this boundary. And she very frequently does. And it's all to show that she's powerful, she has strength, that she's capable and doing all these things. But by the end of the show, she is shows her vulnerability, not just to Chidi, but to in general, she shows her vulnerable side and shows that she's capable of being full, having a fulfilled boundary of who she is without having to confront and be belligerent towards others. And I think that shows up quite well in her. And so the 8, to think of the lines in my head here, the 8 has a relationship to the 2 and the 5 in the lines of the internal lines of development. And once she's in a place of security, she's with people that understands her, she understands them, she becomes a little bit more generous and giving, and that shows up, I would say, in her way to be the pretend architect of season 4, and she's able to be uh, giving, and that's part of what her difficulty was, doing the giving part and being available for others, which is the type 2 land. Can't quite think of an example of her going to the 5 right now, so maybe I'll think of it later. So now the type 9. Now Janet's kind of interesting because she doesn't have a type in the beginning because she doesn't have a personality, but she develops one as the show goes on and has her own motivations and her own fears and such. So Janet literally can make a world in her own head, can daydream and create things into existence. So the type 9, one of the strategies to obtain a sort of harmony and peace is to daydream a situation in which everything's okay. And Janet does that. She literally creates a scenario where she can be okay with the breakup after Jason by making a Derek, right? And this is what a type 9 does. They create a world in which everything's okay. But Janet literally does that. And there are very frequent times in which she hides her conflicts, inner conflict with her emotion, by either not acknowledging them, saying, oh, I'm a Janet, I shouldn't have these feelings, I don't have these feelings, I can't have these feelings, very rejecting, dismissing, ignoring, or saying this isn't an issue. Yeah, but then she's able to attain that harmony and peace by working through that conflict and realizing that having that kind of conflict, that emotional feeling issue with Jason, by acknowledging that, she can continue to have a true harmony. So I would call her a 9. It's a little bit harder because she doesn't really develop as a person until later. And there's the other aspect of where in which she then connects to the other Janet, then kind of pulls them together to make things work, which I would say kind of goes well with that. So to recap my thoughts, Michael is type 1, Tahani type 2, with a three wing. Uh, what's his Chidi is definitely a type 5, and he has kind of the fourness and sickness as well. Jason is somewhere between a 6 and a 7. Eleanor is a type 8, and Janet is a type 9. Uh, Michael is, I would say, the best example of, because it characterizes him so well, the different degrees of health and the lines of development. So um, that is one thing to look at. Are you very Michael like, or hearing this and looking back on what he was like, it was a very one like? Are you very one like? And why I'm doing this is, number one, it's just interesting to me, and Enneagram is interesting, and this show was recommended to me because I'm a philosophy guy, and that's all this stuff. But also, it helps me see different aspects of myself. When am I like Michael? When am I like Jason? When am I like Chidi? When am I like Eleanor? When am I like Tahani? When am I like Janet? And this gives a framework to the lessons I can learn about myself from each of the characters, and also ways to work with other people. Oh, that uh, by learning about uh, fiveness through Chidi, you can work on aspects of that in yourself, but also to be able to be more loving and have holding presence and space for someone else that's a type 5 or has type 5 proclivities. And I'm all about the philosophy, psychology, and practicalities for profound progress and just self improvement and self awareness and personal development. And looking at this is, like I said, not just fun, but also hopefully it triggers something and kind of gives you a shock about, oh, now I see that about myself, because now I see that about Tahani or whomever. Okay, so this was my Enneagram character review of The Good Place. And take a look at my other video where it's more of the philosophy aspects review of The Good Place. And subscribe to check out the other videos. I have a bunch of other Enneagram videos on here. And keep on the lookout for future TV shows or movies. If you have a movie or TV show that you'd like me to watch so I can Enneagramize it, let me know. As a side note, I also am knowledgeable to MBTI and the Jungian typology, but that's a whole different can of worms, and maybe I'll do that in the future. For now, it's about the Enneagram, about TV shows or movies that you like. Give me a comment. And any questions or disagreements or other comments, let me know, and I'll be happy to have that discussion.